dare to venture down Bizarre Boulevard, a realm of mysterious creatures and strange occurrences that defies the boundaries of reality. No matter which path you choose, remember that all roads eventually lead to this chilling and enigmatic destination. The Ratman Chronicles Episode 2. The atmosphere in the small, dimly lit coffee shop was heavy with the scent of brewing coffee and the low murmur of hushed conversations. Amidst the hum of activity, Marco Gonzales sat alone at a corner table, his eyes glued to the screen of his laptop. The young film student from Houston was engrossed in the latest article about the Ratman case, his interest piqued by the chilling details and the air of mystery that surrounded the story. Marco had always been fascinated by the paranormal, drawn to the unknown and the unexplained. He had come to Chicago with dreams of making a documentary that would captivate audiences, and the Ratman seemed like the perfect subject. But first, he needed to get close to the investigation, and that meant finding Mary Hammond. When Marco finally spotted Mary entering the coffee shop, he could hardly contain his excitement. He approached her cautiously, his heart racing as he considered how to broach the topic. "Excuse me, are you Mary Hammond?" Marco asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Mary looked up, her eyes narrowing as she studied the stranger before her. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" "I'm Marco Gonzales, a film student from Houston," he replied, extending his hand. "I've been following your work on the Ratman case, and I wanted to talk to you about it." Mary's eyes flickered with curiosity, but she remained guarded. "Why are you interested in the Ratman?" Marco explained his fascination with the paranormal and his desire to create a groundbreaking documentary. He could see the skepticism in Mary's eyes, but continued, hoping to convince her of his sincerity. "I want to help you expose the truth," he said earnestly. "Together, we can make sure the world knows about the Ratman and the terror it has inflicted on this city." Mary hesitated for a moment, weighing her options. Finally, she agreed to let Marco join her investigation. With Detective Winkfield already on her side, she knew that adding Marco's filmmaking expertise could only strengthen their chances of success. The trio met the next day at Mary's apartment, the small space cluttered with newspaper clippings, maps, and notes related to the case. As Marco surveyed the chaotic scene, he couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation. They were on the brink of uncovering something truly horrifying, and he was determined to capture every moment on film. Together, they discussed their next steps, brainstorming ways to delve deeper into the Ratman's dark history and unmask the creature that had haunted Chicago for over a century. As they spoke, the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, the chilling tales of the Ratman casting a pall over their plans. But despite the fear that gnawed at the edges of their minds, they were united in their determination to unravel the horrifying mystery. And with Marco's camera rolling, they prepared to embark on a journey that would lead them into the very heart of darkness. The trio gathered around the dining room table, the surface littered with police reports, autopsy files, and photographs of the Ratman's victims. The gruesome details stared back at them, a chilling reminder of the dangers they faced in their pursuit of the truth. "Joseph and Tiana were both in their 20s, Mary said, her voice faltering as she recounted the young couple's horrific fate. "They were last seen boarding the Red Line after a date night in the city." Detective Winkfield picked up the thread, his voice somber. "Their bodies were found the next morning, mutilated beyond recognition. The coroner's report confirms the presence of the same claw marks found on the other victims." Marco shuddered as he examined the grisly photographs, the camera in his hands capturing every detail. "What about Otis Faraday? Did he suffer the same fate?" Mary nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Yes, he did. Otis was in his 60s and lived alone. He was returning home from a late-night bingo game when he was attacked." As they analyzed the cases, a pattern began to emerge. All of the victims had been traveling alone or in pairs on the Red Line, making them easy targets for the Ratman. The ferocity of the attacks also seemed to be increasing, a disturbing indication that the creature was growing bolder and more vicious. "We need to find a way to stop this thing before it kills again," Detective Winkfield said, his voice filled with determination. Marco, his eyes glued to the viewfinder of his camera, suddenly spoke up. "Wait, look at this." He pointed to a photograph of one of the crime scenes, his finger hovering over a faint smudge on the wall. "Do you see that? It looks like some kind of symbol." Mary and Detective Winkfield leaned in closer, examining the strange mark. It was barely visible, but they couldn't deny its presence. "It could be a clue," Mary said, her voice filled with hope. "Maybe it's connected to the Rat Man and its origin." The three of them agreed that they needed to learn more about the mysterious symbol, hoping that it would lead them closer to the truth about the Rat Man. And as they continued their analysis, the shadows in the room seemed to grow darker, as if the very presence of the creature was looming over them, a chilling reminder of the horror that awaited them in the depths of the Red Line. The autumn sun was setting, casting long shadows across the worn cobblestone streets as Mary, Detective Winkfield, and Marco made their way to the office of Dr. Eileen Montgomery, a local historian known for her expertise in Chicago's dark and hidden past. They hoped she could shed some light on the cryptic symbols they'd discovered in the photographs of the crime scenes. Dr. Montgomery, a petite woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, welcomed them into her cluttered office, the walls lined with shelves filled with dusty tomes and artifacts from bygone eras. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and history. As Mary presented the photograph to Dr. Montgomery, the historian's eyes widened in recognition. "Yes, I've seen this symbol before," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and dread. "It's an ancient curse, believed to have originated in the early days of Chicago." "The curse?" Marco asked, his camera capturing the historian's every word. Dr. Montgomery led them to a tattered, leather-bound book, her hands trembling as she turned to a page marked with the same eerie symbol. "The curse was said to have been used by those seeking revenge or retribution, summoning dark forces to carry out their bidding." As they listened to Dr. Montgomery's chilling account, Mary couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. "Do you think it's possible that the Rat Man is a manifestation of this curse?" The historian hesitated, her eyes reflecting the weight of the knowledge she held. "It's difficult to say for certain, but the connection seems too strong to be mere coincidence." With this newfound knowledge, the trio left Dr. Montgomery's office, the sun having long since disappeared behind the horizon, leaving them enveloped in the cold embrace of the night. The air was thick with the foreboding sense that they were now delving into something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Determined to learn more about the symbol and its potential connection to the Rat Man, they spent their days poring over old newspapers, scouring the archives for any mention of similar incidents or sightings. The city's past seemed to be filled with tales of terror and the unexplained, the haunting stories casting a dark shadow over the streets they walked. As the days turned to weeks, the hunt for the truth began to take its toll on Mary, Detective Winkfield, and Marco. Sleepless nights and unsettling dreams plagued them, as if the very darkness they sought to uncover had wormed its way into their minds. But despite their growing fear, they knew that they could not turn back now. The lives of countless innocent people depended on them, and they were determined to unmask the horrifying truth about the Rat Man, no matter the cost. Mary, Detective Winkfield, and Marco huddled together in the dimly lit living room of Mary's apartment, the eerie silence broken only by the howling wind outside. Their eyes were bloodshot from countless hours of research, and the weight of the knowledge they carried bore down on them like an oppressive shadow. "We can't keep waiting for answers," Mary said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "We need to confront the Rat Man directly." Detective Winkfield frowned, concern etched on his weary face. "Are you sure that's wise, Mary? We don't know what we're dealing with, and the danger is all too real." Marco nodded in agreement, gripping his camera tightly. "As much as I want to capture this thing on film, we can't underestimate the risk involved." Mary looked at them, her eyes burning with determination. "I know the risks, but we can't let fear hold us back. We need to be brave if we're going to save the people of Chicago from this horror." After a tense silence, Detective Winkfield and Marco reluctantly agreed to the plan. They knew the dangers they faced, but their desire to protect the innocent and expose the truth outweighed their fears. In the following days, they prepared for their harrowing journey into the depths of the Red Line. They stocked up on makeshift weapons, flashlights, pepper spray, and even a taser, knowing that they would need every advantage they could muster against the monstrous creature that lurked within the city's dark underbelly. As the fateful night approached, the trio gathered once more in Mary's apartment, their nerves frayed by the weight of the task that lay before them. The room was filled with an uneasy tension, the shadows seeming to press in on them from all sides. "We need to stick together," Detective Winkfield cautioned, his voice barely audible above the pounding of his own heart. "No one goes off alone, and if something happens, we get out of there as fast as possible." Marco nodded, his hands trembling as he checked the battery on his camera. "We'll document everything we can, but our safety comes first." Mary took a deep breath, steeling herself for the horrors they were about to face. "Let's do this, for the victims, and for everyone who's ever been afraid to ride the red line." With a final nod of determination, they stepped out into the cold night, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of the darkness that awaited them. As they boarded the red line, the train car empty save for their huddled forms, the lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted around them. The pursuit of a sinister truth had begun, and the line between bravery and madness had never been so thin. The train car rattled and groaned as it sped through the darkness, the dim overhead lights casting a sickly pallor over Mary, Detective Winkfield, and Marco. Their breaths came in shallow gasps, the air heavy with fear and anticipation. With every passing minute, the tension mounted, their senses heightened, and the darkness outside the windows seemed to grow deeper and more oppressive. As the train approached the station where Joseph and Tiana had met their grisly fate, Marco readied his camera, the lens aimed at the rapidly approaching platform. "Get ready," he whispered, his voice strained with anxiety. "We might not have much time." The train screeched to a halt, and as the doors slid open, a gust of frigid air rushed into the car, the chill settling into their bones. The platform was deserted, the silence broken only by the distant echoes of their own beating hearts. Mary peered into the darkness, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the Rat Man. "I don't see anything," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. Suddenly, a piercing scream split the silence, the sound reverberating through the empty station. Mary's heart leaped into her throat as she turned to face the source of the scream, a young woman who had been waiting at the far end of the platform, her face contorted with terror. Detective Winkfield acted quickly, his hand gripping the taser at his side. "Mary, Marco, stay behind me. We don't know what's out there." As they approached the terrified woman, they caught a glimpse of movement in the darkness. A low growl echoed through the station, the sound sending shivers down their spines. They had found the Rat Man. The monstrous creature lunged at them from the shadows, its beady eyes filled with malice and hunger. Marco's camera flashed, capturing the horrific sight as the Rat Man bore down on them, its monstrous claws slashing through the air. With lightning-fast reflexes, Detective Winkfield fired the taser, the electric jolt hitting the creature squarely in the chest. The Rat Man recoiled, its unearthly shriek filling the station as it retreated into the darkness. Breathing heavily, the trio turned to the woman who was now trembling with fear and shock. "Are you okay?" Mary asked, her voice quivering with concern. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You saved my life." As they escorted the woman to safety, the chilling encounter weighed heavily on their minds. They had come face to face with the Rat Man, and though they had escaped unscathed, they knew that their battle was far from over. The darkness that haunted the red line had grown bolder, and the line between the shadows and the light had never been more perilous. Thank you for listening to the Rat Man Chronicles. Join us for more episodes.